Life Audio.
Welcome to the Team Us podcast, where we share how grace, commitment, and cooperation can help couples live the everyday moments of marriage together.
Hey everyone, we're Ted
and Ashleigh
Slater. Today we're talking with author, speaker, Bible teacher, and podcaster Jennifer Rothschild and her husband Phil about how to team up in all seasons of life.
So Ted, whenever we do an interview with another couple, the first question I like to ask them is, tell us in 3 minutes or less how God brought you together. But I can't remember if we've ever shared with listeners how we met. So if you were asked in 3 minutes or less how God brought us together, what would you say? I have a bet on what you're going to say, so we'll see.
We met on eBay.
I knew that was what you were going to say because you like to tell people that.
No, we met at church. I saw this. I was drawn to her. Let's just say that.
Yes.
And I remained drawn to her.
Good. Hey, and that was like in a minute or less.
Yeah.
That was pretty good.
Yeah, it was fun. That was a fun season of life. This is a fun season of life. Yeah. That was fun. You know, all the dreams and the butterflies and the flirting and stuff without coming across as too flirtatious.
Right. We've been through a lot of seasons of life, haven't we?
Wow. 20-something.
21 years. Yeah. Well,
it's getting up to 3 minutes. We better cut this short.
And today's interview guests.
Yes.
They have been through even more seasons of life together than we have. And we actually asked this question to them in our interview with them. And our guests are Phil and Jennifer Rothschild. And I'm really excited to have them on the podcast.
Oh, they're really, really good people.
I first met them back in, I think it was 2017, when I actually interviewed with them to be the social media and content coordinator for their ministry.
You should have gotten that job.
I did get the job.
Oh.
Yes. And I worked with them for, I think, a little over 3 years, or it was 3.5 years. And they, the only reason I left is because it was time to pursue more freelance rather than regular work.
Yeah, they were a great team to work with and continue to be really cool people. Yeah,
they're just real and generous and genuine and wise.
Yep.
I just have a lot.
Nice microphone. Do you see that microphone? No, he had a nice microphone.
I'm pretty sure that's her microphone. Her and KC's, because they do the 413 podcast. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Well, during the years I was working with them, they actually launched that podcast. So a lot of what I know about podcasting, I learned from Jennifer. Mm-hmm. So let me give an official bio for those who might not know Phil and Jennifer. Jennifer is known for her substance, signature wit, and down-to-earth style. A unique mix of profound and playful, she weaves biblical truth with relatable stories, making God's word accessible to those just starting out in Scripture and endearing to those who have walked with Christ for years. She's the author of a lot of books. I think when I looked up her most recent bio, it was about 19. And that includes 9 video-based Bible studies with Lifeway, including Amos, Take Courage, Psalm 23, and she has a new one coming out in January 2025, and that's called Heaven. As I mentioned, she hosts the 413 podcast with her friend KC. She's also the host and Bible teacher for Fresh Grounded Faith women's conferences. Jennifer's been blind since she was age 15 and is a boy mom, and she lives in Missouri with her husband, Phil. Phil's a professor, so she affectionately calls him Dr. Phil.
Dr. Phil.
Yes. And they're joining us today to talk about how to team up in all seasons of life. Because like we said, they've been through even more seasons than we have. So let's listen in on our conversation with Phil and Jennifer after this short break. Phil and Jennifer, we are so excited to have you guys on the podcast. I mean, I don't know if you already know this, but you are one of my favorite couples. So we are just thrilled to be able to chat with you on this episode.
Well, we feel the same way, Ashleigh. You guys are one of our favorite couples also, and I'm grateful for our history, and just it's sweet we get to reconnect.
Oh, thank you. Well, we love to hear stories of how couples met, but since we tend to try to keep the podcast short, here's a challenge for you. Can you tell us in like 3 minutes or less how God brought you together?
Ooh, okay, challenge. Challenge accepted.
Go, honey.
All right. 2 words. I don't need 3 minutes. I need 2 words. Tony Mosley. That's how God brought us together, because Tony Mosley was my husband Phil's roommate. Phil and I we didn't even know each other at the time, but I was dating his roommate, Tony. And Tony very graciously one day in the cafeteria introduced me to his roommate, and I was smitten when I met Phil Rothschild. And Tony figured it out, and it wasn't but a few weeks later when he said, "Hey, who is it that you really like?" And he started naming guys, and I was like, no. And then he got to Phil Rothschild, and I was silent, and he knew. So long story short, God used a failed dating relationship with Tony Mosley, who did remain friends and was the best man in our wedding. He used that to bring us together.
That's right. In fact, I remind people that I was a sophomore. Jennifer was a freshman. I knew that she couldn't see. I knew I had a chance, so I pursued her. And what do you know? 4 years later, I accepted her marriage proposal.
Yeah, right? But we did. We dated off and on for 4 years. Once I graduated, he had been graduated a year, and we did marry, and the rest is history.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That's just such a fun story. And I love that Tony was just direct with you.
Oh, he was very direct. Well, I think he sensed once I met Phil that just something changed between me and Tony. And it was exactly true. Something did change. And forever I was changed because of meeting Phil Rothschild. So, yeah, he was a good friend to both of us.
Still keep up with Tony as well.
Yeah.
Today on social media. Although, we're getting to that age where he's saying, "Hey, Phil, when did we go to college? When did we graduate? When did we marry? How many kids do you have?" He's always asking those kind of questions now.
That's funny. I have not been married as long as you guys have, and I'm already feeling that a little bit. Okay, so you guys work together in ministry, you host events, and you travel together. What are 2 or 3 things that help you stay a united team as you do all of these things side by side?
Yeah, there's a couple things that come to my mind. I mean, one of those things is that we recognize our individual strengths. Right. I mean, there's no doubt that I'm not the great communicator in our family. Jennifer Rothschild is an exceptional communicator, so I just kind of stay out of that particular lane. I don't even come up with the ideas of with the idea of possibly doing something on the platform. I just simply want to be the person behind the scenes, which is kind of my strength. I'm kind of a behind the scenes optimizer. I can have some great ideas, but really it's up to Jennifer to, be the person on the platform. And I think knowing those strengths has really been important to us.
Yeah, because the way I think of it too is like we have the same heart for ministry. We have the same goal. We're going the same direction, in other words. We have the same destination, but we're not in the same lane getting there. And so I think us knowing each other's strengths, but even beyond that is respecting them. Because sometimes when you're married to someone who you work with, you see so much that you want to be able to refine and correct, which doesn't help the creative process when you're working together. So recognizing that he has a lane and I have a lane. And we don't need to veer into each other's lanes, because what it does is it interrupts the other person's flow. So being able to cheer each other on, I think that's another one, Phil.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that we do that. As we are going the same direction in different lanes, we are cheering each other on from each of our lanes and acknowledging each other's strength. I have no greater encourager than Phil. As if it's the first time he's heard me say or do something, he will encourage me and be so kind. So all of that, I think, knowing our strengths and then encouraging each other's strengths and encouraging each other within those strengths has probably helped us the most. Anything else you think of, Phil?
No, I just think that's really, really key is to, be affirming to one another for whatever we do and to verbalize that. Because I think, a head nod is something that you can't see.
Right.
Because of your blindness. So I need to affirm you verbally when you come off the stage, or just as a side hug when you sit down, or, when I know of something that's great's happened in your life. So I want to be able to be very verbal with my affirmations. And I can just tell you honestly that I've noticed you, Jennifer, constantly affirming some of the things that I've been doing in my career.
Yeah, try to.
As a professor, as my side gig, or maybe my real gig, I'm not sure which one it is, but you recognize what I do well in terms of the relationship with students, and you affirm that. And it really helps me to know that I'm doing the things that God's called me to do, called me to do, and trying to do the best at it. So I think that's really key.
Well, Ashleigh and Ted, that old book, it feels old now, maybe it isn't, by Gary Chapman, The 5 Love Languages.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is so legit. It really is legit. And when we can communicate to the other based on what they will hear and understand, I do think it helps all of us have a happier outcome, in our marriage, working together or just being married, which, by the way, being married and working together complicates both.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, because Ted and I, we both work from home at this point. We're not, other than like the podcast, we're not working together, but there have been periods in our marriage where we have worked on websites or things like that together. And it adds another element to the relationship. I think it's just so wise what you just shared, because I think it also keeps it can help keep competitiveness out of the relationship, because some couples may struggle with that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's so true.
Go ahead, honey.
I was just going to say the other thing that I think is super valuable is as your ministry grows and as you work together, I think it's real important to make sure you find people that can support you. What I mean by that is there's a certain point in time in your ministry development as you work together that you're going to need somebody to carry some of the load. And so I think one of the key things we did early on as we're working together, just tandem, we finally found a great assistant that could help carry some of the load, because I think some of the conflict that we had in our working relationship was due to an overwhelming sense of stress.
Yeah, just too much.
Carrying everything.
Mm-hmm.
So finding that person, maybe it's 10 hours a week, maybe it's 20 hours a week, to help carry the load a little bit, I think it's really beneficial to the overall work relationship as well.
That's a good word.
Yeah, that's really good. So you all have been married over 30 years, right?
That's right.
Okay. Were there any seasons where it was harder to stay a team than others? And if so, I think we all have those seasons, but
right.
Do you have any practical words of wisdom for those who are listening who might be in the middle of one of those harder seasons?
Well, first of all, do we have to pick just one? Because we've had so many. And
yeah.
I think I'll never forget being at a party one time as a newlywed, and we were all talking about, we were playing some kind of game, and everybody went around the circle, and we were having a similar question about, do you fight or what do you fight about? And I remember this one couple saying, we never fight. And I remember sitting there going, I was so jealous and so upset. Well, she became one of my dearest friends and told me later that was one of their biggest problems, because they never were honest with each other. So therefore there was never any conflict. So yes, we have had plenty of seasons like that. And I guess I'll go ahead, Phil, and then see what you've got to say about that.
Yeah.
I think for me as the wife, sometimes I would get weary of the battle. Like I'd be just, okay, whatever, and then instead of being willing to confront or deal with something, I would build resentment. That is what I would advise against. As hard as it is to face the conflict, face the confrontation, face the hard thing, that is a better hard than choosing not to and having it grow into bitterness and resentment, which is a more difficult hard to deal with later because it becomes more hardened in your heart. So that's one thing, is just this idea of persevering through it and knowing that when you're in the middle of the hard season, that even if you don't like the other person at the moment, the relationship, the children, all of that is worth it. It is worth persevering. So don't quit too soon, because you will not always feel this way.
So good. So good. That's so true. The other thing that I would say, and I think about this, when it comes to our relationship, I remember the first 3 to 5 years of our marriage, just being married and doing work together was always quite a challenge.
Yeah.
So there was that season for sure. And then there was a season when we were grad school, Florida State University, for 6 years. We were, basically living at the poverty level, just being able to make it work. But it was the sweetest.
It was the sweetest, yeah,
that we had, because we were eating a lot of beanie weenies, for dinner. And that period of time was very, very stressful. And then, of course, having kids and then working together until our kids were in college and out of college. I will say that this season of our life as empty nesters has been the sweetest, I think. Would you agree with that, Jen?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think sometimes, too, we assume that a problem in our marriage during a season when it's difficult is because there's a problem in our marriage. Often the problem is outside our marriage and it's coming to fruition inside our relationship. When teenagers are difficult, we tend to attack each other. Or this, what Phil and I have said to each other many times is, you're not the enemy. I'm not the enemy. Stress is the enemy. Right. We are on the same team. Stress is the enemy here. And sometimes we got to call it out, and we can get so tangled up in the emotion that we don't recognize the real enemy. And therefore we give in too soon and just get defeated.
Yeah. I think one of the other things that we have practiced more frequently, more often over these last many years is giving thanks, or I guess I'd say it this way, looking back and giving thanks for what God has done. And boy, when you take some time to reflect on the opportunities that God has provided, the blessings and the favor he has shown to both of you as a married couple, but also to your kids and to your ministry, looking back and giving thanks along the way is so very important, to be reminded of God's faithfulness throughout the decades. So I'd really, recommend that to anybody that was whatever phase or stage of marriage relationship they're in, to take time to look back and give thanks.
Well, that's a good word. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all good. I mean, I feel like that's one of those things, like, for those listening, they need to rewind and listen to it again, because there's just so much wisdom in that. I mean, Ted and I have often talked about you need more than love to keep you together, because you're not always going to feel it. And we have found that having a common enemy sometimes, whether it's stress or whatever challenge we're facing, has helped us not turn on each other. Not that we don't still have moments where we forget that, but that's definitely been very helpful to us.
Jennifer, one of the practical things that I'd love Jennifer to share would be what we did to one of our dictionaries, Jennifer.
Oh,
it really has helped out.
Early on, so I had this dictionary that I bought when I was in college, and when Phil and I first got married, I don't remember what prompted it. I'm sure someone had shared the example, but Phil got an X-Acto knife, and he turned to the page in the dictionary where the word divorce was, and he literally X-Acto knifed out the word divorce and its definition. So literally, we still have this blue dictionary sitting on our shelf in our kitchen, and there is a hole in that page where the word divorce should have been. And it was our moment where we decided, no matter how bad it gets, divorce is not an option. It is not in our dictionary. It is not in our lexicon. And we've thought about it many times, because there was one particularly dark season where we just thought, this is not going to work out. We're too different. It's just not going to work out. And it was not an option for us. And I'm so thankful.
Boy, on the other side of it, it's been so rich. It's been so rich.
Wow. I love that, because that's it's not just, verbally agreeing. It's it's creating a visible reminder of that.
Sometimes those little practical things you do can make the biggest difference.
Yep. They preach their own sermon, don't they?
Yes. Yeah. All right. Well, I feel like the conversation has been too short, but where can listeners connect with you online? Where can they find you?
Well, they easily can just Google my name, Jennifer Rothschild, or they can go to jenniferrothschild.com. And my last name, our last name, has a sneaky little S in it. So it's jenniferrothschild.com.
Nice. And you will be, we're end of July right now. When you have a new Bible study coming out? When does that come out?
I do. Thank you for asking. It comes out in January of 2025, and it's on heaven. The subtitle is When Faith Becomes Sight. But the beautiful thing, Ted and Ashleigh, is that what we know about heaven and when it becomes real to us, it changes today. It really does. Gives us so much hope, so much certainty, so much joy. We can live with abandon, and I can't wait for people to get heaven in their hands and in their hearts in January.
Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time to chat with us. I know that our listeners are going to get so much out of this interview.
We've loved the time with you.
We loved it. God bless you both.
Yes,
thanks,
you
Ted.
too.
Thanks, Ashleigh.
Ted, that was such a great conversation with Phil and Jennifer.
Sure was.
They're really wise, but they're also a lot of fun.
That's true.
And I really loved how Jennifer shared that in the earlier years of marriage, during some difficult seasons, that sometimes, she would get weary of the battle and start to build resentment. Because I think that's something that a lot of women are prone to do.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I think I have done that in some seasons.
Not this one.
No, not this current season. No,
You
we're
would tell
good.
me.
Yes, I would tell you. Yes. But I think that's so helpful and wise, to just encourage us and those listening to face the conflict and the hard stuff. She said that facing conflict is a better hard than choosing not to and having it grow into bitterness and resentment.
See, that's something we kind of often bring up, doing the hard work of and dealing with conflict and not ignoring it, thinking, it'll simmer down on its own, but work through the conflict. That's something that is kind of almost every episode.
Right. And I think once you've done that and you get through it, the next time you face it, you go, oh, okay. We know that if we push through the hard, the better's on the other side.
Yeah, it's always been that way.
Yeah. So I loved her encouragement not to quit too soon. All right. After this break, we'll be back with this week's Us Time Challenge. So for this week's Us Time Challenge, I think listeners should find a couple they know who have been married for 30 years or more and ask them what they've done to remain a team and then put some of that advice into practice in their marriages.
Would you text them or email them or phone them? Or
You could. Or, you could even do a Facebook post, social media post.
Oh.
Hey, my friends who've been married this long.
See, that's easy. How hard is that?
Right. And then it's kind of crowdsourcing in a sense and
And people love talking about themselves on Facebook.
and giving advice.
And giving advice.
Yes.
Oh, that's a good idea. That's an easy Us Time Challenge.
Yes. All right. Well, thanks for joining us on the Team Us podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast, and we'd love to have you leave a review over at Apple Podcasts. We're looking forward to next time as we keep talking about how grace, commitment, and cooperation can help couples live the everyday moments of marriage together.
Team Us with Ted and Ashleigh Slater is a production of Life Audio and Salem Media. If you liked what you heard today, please take a second to rate and review the podcast in your favorite podcast app so that more listeners like you can find the show. For more faith-filled, inspirational podcasts, visit us at lifeaudio.com.